Rome was burning. A fever had taken the city. It was everywhere, in the slums, in the palace. The whole empire was waiting for the emperor to fall apart. But Marcus Aurelius didn't. He didn't panic. He picked up a pen. He wrote something down, a line to steady himself, a reminder about a fortress inside. A man finding calm while his world is falling apart. This isn't just history. It's a blueprint, a way to build resilience, the same principles he used. We're going to see how he did it, how he took a catastrophe and made it a test for his character, what strength really means when everything is breaking. The plague took lives without reason. A senator, a soldier, a child in the street. It made no distinction, and this was the one fact Marcus Aurelius could not change. He couldn't command the illness to stop. He couldn't order it to spare his friends or his own family. That reality is the core Stoic practice. They call it the dichotomy of control. It's this simple, brutal act of sorting the world into two piles. In one pile, everything outside your command, the weather, what other people do, the spread of a sickness. Even how long you live. In the other pile, just one thing, your own mind, your judgments, your choices, how you respond to the world as it is. The philosopher Epictetus, Marcus studied him, he put it plainly. He said some things are up to us and some things are not up to us. What's up to us? Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, what we turn away from. Whatever is our own doing, what's not up to us, our bodies, our possessions, our reputation, our judgments, our labels, our stories. They color everything, and Marcus knew he could choose the color. The plague wasn't just a plague, it was a test of his character, a chance to serve. A natural phenomenon like a flood or a fire. In his private writings, he gave himself an instruction. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Look at that. The obstacle isn't a stop sign. It's the path itself." The suffering in the streets wasn't just a horror to be mourned. It was a direct call, a call to his compassion, a call to his duty. He reframed the entire crisis. He saw it as the arena where he could prove what he was made of. Where his philosophy would either be real or it would be worthless. Think of how he might have walked through the city, seeing not just loss but a need for comfort. Hearing not just cries of pain but a demand for steady leadership. This is cognitive reframing, taking the raw material of an event and consciously crafting a more useful story about it. Not a naive story, a purposeful one. He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." So the plague, an outside event, was neutral. His mind gave it meaning, and he chose a meaning that empowered him to act. Now bring this down, not to a plague but to a traffic jam, a missed promotion. A critical comment from a friend. Your first judgment might be, "This is terrible, this is unfair, this ruins my day." That's the automatic story. The discipline of perception asks you to pause and craft a new one. What if this traffic jam is a chance to practice patience, or to listen to an audiobook you've been putting off? What if that missed promotion is a signal? A signal to reassess your path or to build a new skill. What if that critical comment, stripped of its sting, contains one tiny grain of useful feedback? The event itself hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has transformed, and with that, your power has returned. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are a student in the classroom of life. Marcus Aurelius sat in the highest office in the world, and his greatest power was this: the power to tell himself a different story about the storm raging outside his window. He wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This is the fortress of the mind, and its gates are controlled by your perception." Marcus Aurelius didn't just endure the plague, His philosophy pushed him to try and love it. That idea is Amor Fati, a love of your fate. It's more than acceptance. Acceptance is saying, this storm is here, I can't change it. Love says, this storm is necessary. I welcome its role in the whole thing. For a Stoic like Marcus, fate was just the unfolding of a rational cosmos. Everything was connected. Every event, even a plague, was a thread in a vast tapestry. To resent one thread was to misunderstand the entire design. His duty was to trust the weaver. In his meditations, he writes a line for the hardest moments. He says, everything that happens is as normal as the rose in spring or the fruit in summer. That includes disease and death and slander and intrigue, all the things that delight or trouble foolish people. He trained himself to see the plague not as an aberration, but as part of nature's cycle. As inevitable as the setting sun, this wasn't a cold stance, it was fuel. This love of fate powered him through the grim daily work. Organizing relief wasn't a burden. It was his sacred role in the pattern. Comforting a grieving citizen wasn't a depressing duty. It was an expression of the universe's interconnectedness. He could look at the suffering and think, this is the material I've been given. My job isn't to curse the clay, but to sculpt it with courage and compassion. The obstacle became the way. Now, translate that from an emperor's pandemic to your own life. Amor Fati asks you to look back at a past difficulty, a breakup, a job loss, a failure. And not just say, I got through it. It asks you to find how it shaped you, to love it for the strength it forced you to develop, for the path it closed so a better one could open. For the humility it taught you. So here's a small practice. Bring to mind one past challenge that still feels sharp. Then write down one sentence, one way that event, as hard as it was, led to a growth you value. Or a lesson you needed, or a new direction you found. Maybe that loneliness taught you the true meaning of self-reliance. Maybe that setback pushed you toward a passion you'd ignored. You're not erasing the pain, you're reframing its place in your story, choosing to see it as a necessary thread, however dark, in the tapestry of who you are now. That's how Marcus Aurelius faced the deadliest plague, not with despair, but with a solemn, active love for the duty it presented. He loved his fate because it was his to live. Where you are right now, the problems in your life can feel like everything, but lift your eyes. Imagine going up, through the ceiling, past the clouds, until the city below is just a grid of lights. Keep going until the continent is a shape on a globe, until the earth itself is a pale blue dot in all that black. That's the view from above. Marcus Aurelius used this. It was his way to push back against despair. He'd do this in his mind, zoom out, see his own life from that distance, see his empire, see the plague. From way out there, the noise of Rome got quiet, the forums, the legions, the lines of sick people. It all shrank down to the size of an anthill on a tiny rock. He writes, look at the past, the empires of Alexander, Pompey, Caesar. See how the whole earth is just a point, and on that point, think of all the cities that have risen and fallen. All the plagues that have swept through, all the wars, all the generations that lived and died. All of it, he says, is smoke, or it will be the Antonine Plague. To the people living through it, it felt like the end, but from up there, it was just another chapter, a hard chapter, but still a chapter, in a story billions of years long. This view didn't make him cold, it made him humble, it gave him a sense of proportion. His own grief, the friends he lost, the weight of the crown, those were real. But they weren't the center of everything, they were small human events on a small planet. This zoom out is an antidote to anxiety. Anxiety makes things huge. Immediate, permanent, the view from above shrinks them, puts them in context, reminds you they're temporary. Picture him at a friend's funeral, a victim of the plague. The sorrow was real, it was deep, but he could hold another thought alongside it. He writes, soon you will have forgotten the world, and soon the world will have forgotten you. Death is a natural process, like a leaf falling in autumn. Everyone who has ever lived has faced it, or will. That doesn't erase the love or the grief. It just frames it, puts it inside the grand cycle of all life. It turns a personal tragedy into something shared. Now bring it down, apply it to your own worry. That argument that feels like it will define everything, that money mistake that seems to have ruined your future, that rejection that feels like a verdict on you. Step back, see it from above. Ask, how will I think about this in 5 years? Will I even remember it clearly? Zoom out more. Look back from the end of a long life. How big will this one event seem in the whole story? Now the final zoom. Picture Earth from a distant star. On that speck, one person is holding a worry. See how small it gets. This doesn't say your problems are meaningless. It says they're part of a meaning much larger than themselves. It drains the panic from a moment and replaces it with perspective. It's the quiet voice that says, this too shall pass, because everything does. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in his world, and he regularly reminded himself of his own smallness, not to feel insignificant, but to find the freedom that comes with that humility, to do his duty. Not as the center of the universe, but as one man playing his part in an ancient story. Others were hiding. Marcus was governing. He didn't find peace by stepping away from his work. He found it by stepping into the work. That's the Stoic idea. Peace doesn't come from avoiding what you have to do. It comes from doing it completely. For him, virtue wasn't a quiet feeling. It was action, the right action. Action that fit his role as a leader, as a citizen, as a person. His mind could have been a trap of worry. But he made his duty the way out. Every moment, he wrote, is a chance. Do what's in front of you. Do it with real seriousness. Do it tenderly, willingly. With justice, and with the sense that the task itself is a gift. That's the point. Presiding over a state funeral wasn't a grim duty for him. It was a sacred chance to offer dignity. Allocating money for doctors and grain shipments wasn't bureaucratic work. It was justice in action. Keeping law and order in a frightened city wasn't about control. It was about creating a structure for people to care for each other. His action was his meditation. Every decree, every letter, every public appearance was a stitch. He was stitching the torn fabric of society back together, and with every stitch, he was also repairing something inside himself. That focus left no space for paralyzing fear. That purpose gave the hardship meaning, so you have to ask, what are your core roles, not your job title, your fundamental duties? Are you a parent? Then your duty is the patient guidance of a young life. Are you a friend? Your duty is to listen and to show up. Are you an employee or a creator? Your duty is to contribute honest, focused work. In stressful times, these roles become anchors. When anxiety about the future gets loud, your duty is in the present. It's making breakfast, it's finishing the report, it's calling someone who might be alone. Your own plague, whatever it is, will try to make you freeze, to obsess over the storm you can't control. Marcus would say to look down at your hands. See the work they can do right now, and to do that work with a kind of solemn joy, because this action, this small, correct action, is where your virtue is. It's where you find that strange, steady peace inside the chaos. You stop watching the disaster. You become part of the response, and in that shift, everything changes. Rome was under siege for a long time, a quiet one. The enemy wasn't an army outside the walls, it was inside, invisible, but Marcus Aurelius had a fortress. Something a plague couldn't touch. He called it the inner citadel, and it wasn't a real place, it was a mental one, built from reason, from principle. A space he could retreat into to find calm, no matter what was happening outside. The Stoics had this idea. They said our true self, it isn't the body. The body can get sick. It isn't our possessions, those can be lost. Our true self is our faculty of judgment. our ability to choose our response, and that faculty, they said, needs to be fortified. Like a city, Marcus wrote about this. He said people look for retreats in the country, by the sea, in the mountains, but that's unphilosophical. You can retreat into yourself. At any moment, nowhere is more peaceful, less busy than your own soul, especially if you have basic thoughts inside you, thoughts you can return to. And then be at ease. So think of him getting a report, another district of the city, fallen to the illness. The messenger is trembling, expecting grief. Or anger, but Marcus is quiet. He turns inward, he retreats to that inner citadel. Inside those walls, the news is just information, a fact about the world. His first duty isn't to feel devastated. It's to understand, to assess, to decide the next right action. The walls of his citadel were built from principles. Justice, courage, temperance, wisdom. The plague could rage against those walls, but it couldn't topple them. His tranquility came from knowing that. As long as he governed from that inner stronghold, he was doing his part. He was intact. So building your own, it starts with bedrock principles, the non-negotiable values. The ones that define who you want to be, especially under pressure. Is it honesty when a lie is easier? Is it kindness when you're treated harshly? Is it perseverance when you want to quit? These are the stones for your walls. Then you practice the retreat, not as an escape, but as a recalibration. The next time you get stressful news, a critical email, a personal setback, you pause. Before you react, you step back inside. You take one conscious breath. You ask, what does my principle of courage ask of me here? What would integrity look like in this response? From that fortified place, your reaction isn't a raw burst. It's a chosen action, aligned with who you are at your core. Marcus showed that peace isn't the absence of a storm. It's the certainty of a sanctuary within. A place where the noise of the world grows faint, and the only voice you have to heed is your own reasoned conscience. To have such a place to go, no matter what happens outside. Memento Mori wasn't a dark saying for Marcus Aurelius. It was how he got through the day. Death was everywhere in the streets, so remembering you'll die, that Stoic habit, it became practical. It wasn't about being scared, it was about paying attention, knowing that every person he saw, every case he heard, every single day, it was all finite. That knowledge, it put a kind of urgency into everything he did. The Stoics understood this. Seneca said you should live each day as if it's your last. But he didn't mean to rush around. He meant to see what matters, to be here now. He wrote that we die a little every day. Every hour takes some life away. So the person who's lived the most isn't the oldest. It's the one whose life was fullest. For Marcus during the plague, that thought was always there. It made his vision sharper. In his private notes, he tells himself, you could leave life right now. Let that decide what you do, what you say, what you think. That's a filter. If this ruling, this talk, this moment, if it could be your last act, what would you want it to be like? That practice would have changed his daily work. Sitting in court, he knew the people in front of him, the plaintiffs, the defendants, they were living under the same shadow of sickness. Their time was uncertain, just like his. Knowing that it would have cut away the small stuff, the delays from his judgments, it would have pushed him toward justice, not as some far-off idea. As something needed right now, and comforting a family in grief, Memento Mori would have deepened his compassion. It wasn't just one citizen's loss, it was a truth for everyone. It touched him, it touched them. That shared fragility, it made his leadership feel more human, more connected. The point was to live with virtue now. Not later when things were perfect. The plague meant things weren't perfect. So virtue had to happen today, right now, in the messy, painful reality of the moment. Remembering death cleared away the trivial worries, the empty ambitions, the distractions. It asked one question over and over. Is this thing I'm doing, is it worth my limited time? So you can bring this into your own life. The practice is simple. In the morning or in a quiet moment, remind yourself, I am mortal. The people I love are mortal. This day is a gift, not a promise. Then ask, how does that change things? If you really lived today like it could be your last, what one thing would you do differently? Not some big movie answer, the real one. Would you finally have that hard, honest talk you've been avoiding? Would you put the phone down and really listen to someone? Would you spend an hour on the work that matters to you instead of answering emails? Or would you just stop and feel thankful for the ordinary sky outside your window? This isn't about making you anxious, it's about making things clear. Death is the deadline that makes life urgent. It's the frame that gives the picture meaning. Marcus Aurelius didn't hide from that frame during Rome's worst days. He used it to live with more purpose, more justice, more real compassion while he still could. His peace came from knowing he was spending his numbered days on what actually counted. Stoicism can look cold, but at its center is this one idea, Sympatheia. The interconnectedness of everything, the idea that we're not separate, we're threads in a fabric, and if you harm one thread, you weaken the whole thing. If you care for one, you strengthen it all. For Marcus Aurelius, this wasn't just a nice idea. It was the reason for his compassion. A plague makes people turn inward to hide. His philosophy pulled him outward. It said his well-being was tied to the baker's well-being, the soldier's, the child's in the tenement. He wrote about it. He said, what brings no benefit to the hive brings no benefit to the bee. You're a citizen of the world. You're a limb of the body of humanity, and a limb exists to work with the whole body. It has no purpose alone. Cut it off, it withers. So when that body is sick, the limb's duty is clear, to serve, to help it heal. That's why his response to the plague was systemic. Organizing public health wasn't just good governance. It was Sympatheia. Getting grain to the hungry was justice, because a city where people starve is a body attacking itself. There are stories he visited the sick. Historians debate it, but the idea captures the spirit. A leader who sees himself as part of the communal body doesn't rule from a distance. He tends to the wounds. This view changes duty. It turns it from an obligation into an instinct, like your hand moving to shield your face. A person who feels interconnected moves to shield their community. The suffering of a stranger stops being just their problem. It becomes a shared condition, a break in the shared well-being. So the practical question this week comes from that. What's one action that strengthens your thread in the fabric? It doesn't have to be grand. It's the choice to move from isolation to connection. Check on a neighbor who lives alone. Offer real praise to a colleague no one notices. Volunteer 1 hour. The action is almost secondary. The shift is in perception, to see that person not as separate, but as a vital part of your world. Their flourishing is your flourishing. Their hardship is yours to help carry. That's the quiet heart of Stoicism. It turns philosophy into kinship, and in a fractured world, that might be the most peaceful act. Resilience isn't something you find in a crisis. It's made before that, long before. Marcus Aurelius didn't start learning how to endure when the plague came. He'd already spent a lifetime in training. The Stoics had a name for this. They called it voluntary discomfort. It's a choice you make periodically to experience a mild hardship. To get used to a little lack, to build up a callus on your soul before the world asks for one. It's like a fire drill. You don't wait for the flames to learn where the exits are. You practice when it's safe, so when the real heat arrives, your movements are calm. They're automatic. Life for a Stoic is full of potential fires. Loss, illness, poverty, criticism, voluntary discomfort is the drill. That means eating a simple meal when you could have a lavish one, wearing lighter clothes when it's cool. Sleeping on a harder bed. The point isn't punishment. It's to prove something quiet to your own nervous system, that you can handle this, that you'll be okay. The teacher Musonius Rufus, he influenced Marcus. He was very clear. He said practicing hardship in peace is like a soldier training in peacetime. When war comes, that soldier isn't thrown into confusion. He's ready. Seneca said it another way. He said to set aside a certain number of days where you have only the most basic food and clothing, and then ask yourself, is this the condition I was so afraid of? That's the rehearsal. So when involuntary hardship strikes, and it will, you're not meeting a stranger, you're greeting an old, familiar acquaintance. We have glimpses of Marcus's own drills. He was the emperor of Rome. He could have had anything: gold plates, silken robes, feasts every night. But by all accounts, he lived simply. He often slept on a simple camp bed. He wore plain clothing. He ate the food of a common soldier. This wasn't an act, it was his daily training. He was voluntarily giving up comforts to remind himself they weren't necessary for his peace. So when the plague took away the comforts of an entire city, he wasn't destabilized. His peace didn't live in the palace's luxury. It lived in his practiced ability to do without. So the practice for you, it doesn't need to be extreme. It's a small, conscious choice, a way to take back a bit of your own mental territory from fear. Tomorrow, choose one tiny voluntary discomfort. Take a cooler shower than you're used to. Skip that afternoon snack and sit with the feeling of hunger for an hour. Leave your phone in another room for the evening. Don't turn on the background noise. Just sit in the quiet. In that small moment of choosing, you're not just enduring an inconvenience. You're sending a signal to the deepest part of your mind. You are saying, I am not fragile. My well-being isn't held hostage by perfect conditions. I can adapt. When the real storms of life come, the unexpected bills, the stressful deadlines, the personal losses, you'll have a memory to call on. A memory of a time you chose the harder path and found you were still standing on the other side. That memory becomes a quiet confidence, an unshakable knowing that you are, in fact, much stronger than your circumstances. Marcus trained like this for decades. So when Rome's darkest days arrived, he wasn't practicing, he was performing, and his performance was a masterpiece of calm. A messenger came down the hall. The news was never good. Another death, someone close, a friend. The words hit like a blow. For most people, that's when the feeling takes over. Grief, anger, despair. But for Marcus Aurelius, there was a space, a gap between the thing happening and his reaction. That's the Stoic discipline of managing impressions. It's the most practical thing he had, and it's where freedom actually lives. Our minds get hit all the time. Something happens, and right away our perception slaps a label on it. This is terrible, this is unfair, this ruins everything. That first automatic label, that's the impression. For the Stoics, that impression isn't the truth. It's just a first draft, a suggestion from your senses. The power is in what you do next. You have a choice. You can agree with that impression, let it become your emotion. Or you can pause, look at it, and then choose your judgment. Epictetus said it clearly. He was a former slave, and Marcus studied him every day. He said, people aren't disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. The death of the senator is a thing. The view that it's a catastrophe, that the world is collapsing, that's the disturbance. The event itself is neutral until your mind gives it a value. So picture it, the messenger gives the news, Marcus feels the shock, the initial impression screams, this is a disaster, but then the pause, in that quiet space he uses reason. He might tell himself, this is an external event, it's part of the natural order. My friend has finished his journey. My duty isn't to fall apart, but to honor him and keep working. He separates the raw fact from the story his fear wants to tell. He withholds his agreement from the catastrophic label, and from that cleared space, his response comes. Not a wail of despair, but a calm order for a state funeral. Not a collapse, but a return to duty. That pause is the point of balance. On one side, you're a puppet, jerked by every event. On the other, you're a sovereign mind, choosing your stance. This isn't about suppressing feeling. It's about governing it. The feeling is acknowledged, but it isn't put in charge. The space lets reason sit beside emotion, and lets wisdom have the final say. You can practice this now. The next time your phone buzzes with a stressful text or a difficult email, notice what happens. That first clench in your stomach, that flash of heat, that's the impression. It's the first draft. Now create the pause. Before you type a single word in reply, take one breath. Name the impression to yourself. I am having the impression that this person is attacking me, or I am having the impression that this problem is impossible. Just naming it creates distance. It turns the feeling into an object you can look at, instead of a reality you're drowning in. From that space you can ask, is this impression true? Is it helpful? What would a reasoned response look like? Then, and only then, you act. In that small, daily moment, you're building the same inner fortress Marcus used to stand firm while Rome shook. You're claiming the freedom that exists not in controlling events, but in the pause before you decide what they mean. There's a secret to giving your full effort without ending up heartbroken. Marcus Aurelius knew it. It's called the reserve clause. You act with your whole heart, you give everything you have, and at the same time you add this quiet phrase in your mind. Fate permitting, or the gods willing. It's a kind of footnote to every action. I will do this provided nothing stands in the way. That clause isn't about doubt. It's an acceptance of reality. You commit completely to the effort, but you detach from the specific result, because the result is never fully yours to control. That's how you avoid the bitterness of disappointment. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote about this. He said we should combine a strenuous spirit with a relaxed mind. Plan for what you want, work for it, but don't be so attached to the plan that you're shattered when life has a different idea. He used the example of a traveler. You plan to sail to a certain port. You book passage, you pack, you set out, but a storm comes up, the winds change. You might end up on a different shore entirely. The reserve clause is your acceptance as you board the ship that the weather is not yours to command. You can still be an excellent sailor. You can navigate with skill. But your peace doesn't depend on reaching the original port. It depends on how you sail. For Marcus Aurelius during the plague, this was his daily practice. He organized massive public health measures with total commitment. He funded doctors, arranged for burials, secured food supplies. He gave those orders his complete focus and energy. But inwardly, he held the reserve clause. He accepted that, despite his best efforts, the death toll might still rise, that a new outbreak might erupt in a city he just helped, that his closest advisor might still fall ill. His peace was not conditional on stopping the plague. His peace was in knowing he was doing his duty, fate permitting. The outcome was in the hands of nature. This is the ultimate freedom in action. You're freed from the roller coaster of hope and fear. You pour yourself into the work, not because you're guaranteed a win, but because the work itself is the point. The effort is where your virtue lives. The result is just data. So take a goal you have right now, something you're anxious about, a project at work, a difficult conversation, a personal fitness target. Now apply the reserve clause. Say to yourself, I will prepare for this meeting with all my skill and honesty, fate permitting. I will train for that race with consistency and care, fate permitting. I will have that conversation with courage and kindness, fate permitting. That small phrase does something. It shifts your energy from obsessing over the uncontrollable outcome and pours it entirely into the quality of the action you can control. You stop asking, will this work? And you start asking, how can I do this well? Then, whatever happens, you meet it with a calm mind. If it succeeds, you feel gratitude, not arrogant triumph. If it fails, you feel a quiet curiosity about what to learn, not devastation. You acted with excellence. The rest was never truly yours. This is how an emperor could face a losing battle against a microscopic enemy, day after day, and not be consumed by despair. He wasn't fighting for a guaranteed victory. He was fighting because it was the right thing to do, and in that right action, regardless of the result, he found an unshakable peace. Marcus Aurelius had this question he would ask himself: What would a perfectly wise and courageous person do right now? The Stoics, they had a name for that perfect person. They called that person the sage, and they were clear about it. The sage is an ideal, a model, flawless reason, flawless virtue. No living person could ever become one. Not even an emperor, but that wasn't the point. The point was the asking, the contemplation. By holding up that standard, this perfect imaginary wisdom, you give yourself a mirror. A clear one. You can see your own impulses there, your fears, your actions. It turns a crisis, a confusing one, into a simple test. Not what do I want to do, but what would the sage do? In his private writings, Marcus comes back to this. He doesn't write about becoming the sage. He writes about looking to the sage. He says, when you need encouragement, think of the qualities of the people around you. One person's energy, another's modesty, a third person's generosity. And then he goes further. He says to think of the qualities of good people who are gone, people no longer living, and to keep those examples in front of you. That's the practice. You populate your mind. You fill it with models of excellence, real ones, idealized ones. So when you're lost, you have a council. A council of wise ghosts to consult. So picture him in his council chamber. The reports are grim. The city's grain reserves are low. The eastern provinces are begging for aid. The treasury is strained. He has to decide who gets the last major shipment. It's an impossible choice, weighted with life and death. His advisors are arguing. His own fear is there, whispering about political fallout, about riots. This is where he would turn inward. He would silence the noise, and he would ask his question. What would the sage do, the perfectly just and wise ruler in this room with these facts? The answer wouldn't be a magical solution. It would be a principle. The sage would act without personal fear, without favor. The sage would consider the greatest good for the whole community, not just the loudest voices. The sage would allocate resources based on need, on reason, not on sentiment, not on threat. That contemplation, it strips the decision of its emotional panic. It reframes it from a burden into an application of justice. He might still send the grain to the province with the most acute need, even if it risked unrest in Rome. Because that's what the model of wisdom dictated. His peace came from aligning his action with that standard, not from guaranteeing a peaceful outcome. This is a tool. You can use it anytime you feel pulled by a strong impulse, an unwise one. The next time you're about to send an angry email, or indulge in a harmful procrastination, or shy away from a necessary duty, pause, ask the question, what would my sage do? But first, you have to define your sage. Your ideal might not be a Roman emperor. It might be a version of you operating at your absolute best. So take a moment, define just 3 core qualities of your personal sage. Is it calmness under pressure? Is it unwavering integrity? Is it radical kindness? Write them down, keep it simple. Now, think of a recent situation, a situation where your reaction felt off. Maybe you snapped at a family member. Maybe you avoided a difficult task. Replay it, and then measure your actual reaction against the standard of your sage. How would your sage have acted in that same moment? The gap between your action and the sage's action, that isn't a criticism. It's a map. It shows you the direction for your own growth. That contemplation, that gentle comparison, is how you train your character. You may never reach the ideal, but by constantly looking toward it, you ensure you are always walking in its light. Marcus Aurelius led an empire through its darkest hour by following a star he knew he could never touch. And in that following, he found his way. The book we know as the Meditations wasn't a book. It was a journal, a soldier's field notes written by a man to himself. Marcus Aurelius would write in the quiet before dawn or late at night after a long day. He wasn't writing for anyone else. He was writing to survive. This was his practice, his way of cleaning the mind, confronting the clutter, the fear, the frustration, and putting it in order. He called it going to the little book, a place to look at his raw thoughts and correct them, to remind himself who he wanted to be when everything around him pressured him to be something else. He'd write things like, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Things can't shape our decisions by themselves. Look at it this way." It's a simple instruction, a quiet conversation. He's not preaching. He's coaching himself through a moment, taking a swirling impression, a piece of bad news, an insult, a wave of grief, and holding it up to the light. On the page, he could dissect it. Where is my judgment faulty here? What story am I telling myself that isn't true? What is being asked of me now? This nightly ritual was his decompression chamber, where he could process the pressure of leading through a plague in private, so he could keep his composure in public. The fears, the angers, the temptations to despair, he poured them onto the parchment, examined them, and often disarmed them. By writing, "I am upset because I have lost a friend," he could then write the corrective, "But loss is part of nature. My duty is to honor his memory, not be destroyed by it." The emotion was acknowledged, but it was not left in charge. Think of the alternative, an emperor holding all that tension inside, letting it simmer, letting it color his decisions, his moods. The journal was the pressure valve. It created a space, a pause between what happened and how he responded. On those pages, he practiced the disciplines. He applied the view from above to his personal sorrows. He rehearsed Amor Fati for the latest setback. He fortified his inner citadel, brick by written brick. That's why the meditations feel so immediate. We're not reading a polished thesis. We're reading a man's real-time struggle for sanity, for goodness. It's a manual for self-governance written from the trenches. You can adopt this hygiene. It doesn't require a grand philosophy, just a notebook and a few honest minutes. The Stoic version is specific. It's not just venting. It's not just listing gratitudes. It's an examination, holding your day up against your principles. Tonight, try this. Write one sentence, just one. Examine one moment from your day. Where did you act in alignment with your best self, or where did you fall short? Be specific, but be kind. Not, "I was a failure today," but "in the meeting, I felt the impulse to interrupt, and I chose to listen instead." That is aligning with temperance. Or, "When I received that criticism, my first thought was that the person is unfair. But upon reflection, there was one piece of useful feedback." That is aligning with wisdom. This simple act does two things. It reinforces the behavior you want to cultivate, and it compassionately corrects the missteps without letting them define you. It turns your life into a continuous, gentle curriculum. You are the student and the teacher, holding your own hand through the lessons. Marcus Aurelius's peace wasn't a static state. It was a daily renewal, a quiet conversation with his soul by lamplight, while an empire slept and a plague lingered in the streets. His journal was the tool. It kept his inner world clear so he could face the outer one with a steady heart. Stoics don't just hope for the best, they prepare for the worst. That's the practice Premeditatio Malorum. The premeditation of evils. It's not anxious worrying. Worry is frantic. It's emotional. It asks, what if this terrible thing happens? And then you feel the fear. But premeditation is detached. It's a logical rehearsal. It asks, if this difficult thing happens, what then will I do? It's the difference between being startled by a fire alarm and having calmly studied the evacuation map. One creates panic, the other creates a plan. Seneca was a master of this. In his letters, he advised his friend Lucilius to regularly rehearse life's harshest possibilities. He wrote, "Set aside days where you're content with the scantiest food, the roughest clothes, and ask yourself, is this the condition I feared?" He told him to contemplate poverty, not as a curse, but as a potential state. To think through exile, to consider the loss of reputation, and to meditate on mortality. This wasn't morbid, it was liberating. By visiting these possibilities in the safe theater of the mind, he stripped them of their terrifying unknown. He discovered the outline of a path through each one. The fear of the thing he found was always worse than the reality of navigating it. Marcus Aurelius had done this work long before the plague arrived. He'd read of the great pestilences that swept through Athens, through the early empire. He knew pandemics like wars and famines were part of the cyclical nature of human history. So when the first reports came from the eastern frontier, it wasn't a shocking, unprecedented horror. It was a known scenario, one his mind had already visited. That mental preparation allowed his response to be quicker, less clouded by the paralysis of shock. He could move more swiftly from the question of why is this happening to us, to the practical question of what must we do now. His emotional energy was preserved for compassion and leadership, not wasted on disbelief. You can apply this same immunization. Think of one future event you fear. Not a vague anxiety, but a specific, tangible possibility. A job loss, a difficult medical diagnosis for a loved one, a major financial setback. Now take 5 minutes for a logical rehearsal. Walk through it step by step with a calm mind. If that job ends, what are my immediate financial obligations? What assets or skills do I have to leverage? Who in my network could I reach out to for advice or opportunity? What would a virtuous response look like? One of resilience, honesty, and proactive effort. You're not inviting the event, you're drafting a contingency plan for your own character. You're answering the fear with a quiet, reasoned voice that says, I have considered this. And I see a way forward. This practice builds a profound resilience. When life is stable, you visit the valleys in your imagination. So when you someday find yourself standing at the edge of a real one, you're not seeing it for the first time. You recognize the terrain. You have a map drawn by your own calm foresight. And with that map in hand, you can begin the walk with courage, not with terror. True philosophy is measured in plague-stricken streets, not in lecture halls. For Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism wasn't an abstract theory. It was an operating system for survival. A manual for action. During the crisis, the purity of the philosophy didn't matter. What mattered was the application. Could it hold a man together when everything was falling apart? Could it direct his hands to useful work? That's the unity he embodied. Thought and action fused into a single purpose. He writes a line that cuts to the heart of it. He says, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The arguing is the trap, the being is the path. You see this in how he governed. A theoretical discussion of justice is one thing. It's a conversation about fairness, about ideals. Marcus' application of justice was something else. It was the gritty work of ensuring grain ships reached starving cities, even if it meant emptying the treasury. It was reforming legal procedures for the poor who were suffering most. It was judging cases on the merits, not on status. His philosophy didn't make him deliver speeches about virtue. It made him sign the orders, allocate the funds, and show up. The principle of courage wasn't a concept to admire. It was the decision to remain in Rome at the epicenter when the wealthy fled. His inner citadel wasn't a retreat from the world. It was the command center from which he engaged with it, clearly and calmly. This exposes a misunderstanding about Stoicism, about self-improvement in general. We can mistake understanding for transformation. We can read the books, nod at the quotes, but the gap between knowing the path and walking the path is where real life happens. Marcus was ruthless with this gap in himself. In his journal, he criticizes those who talk beautifully about virtue but live by opposite principles. He calls out the performance. For him, a thought that didn't lead to action was philosophical clutter, noise in the system, so the prompt is direct. Look at the principles you've been exploring. The dichotomy of control, Amor Fati, the view from above. Choose one, just one that you understand in your mind but find difficult to live in your days. Maybe it's accepting what you cannot control, yet you still try to manage another person's choices. Maybe it's loving your fate, yet you still resent a past event. Now, for the next 24 hours, commit to one small, concrete action that bridges that gap. If your principle is focusing on what you can control, your action might be to write a single, manageable to-do list for today. And ignore the overwhelming future. If your principle is courage, your action might be to have one 5-minute conversation you've been avoiding. The action is almost trivial in size. But the commitment is monumental. It's you declaring that your philosophy is not a library of ideas. It is a toolkit for living. In the dust and noise of a real day, that's where your inner citadel gets built. Not from reading the blueprint, but from laying the bricks. A forest doesn't mourn a fallen leaf. It accepts the season. For the Stoics, that wasn't just a metaphor. It was a truth about reality. They saw a universe governed by a rational principle. They called it logos, reason, order, the organizing intelligence of the whole. Everything, the orbit of a planet, the growth of a seed, was an expression of that logos. It was a cosmos, not a chaos, a beautiful, interconnected system following its own natural laws. And in that system, death and disease weren't evils. They were processes, necessary parts of the cycle. A forest fire clears the undergrowth so new trees can grow. A storm brings rain that ends a drought. The plague, then, was a devastating event, but a natural one, part of the logos, not a departure from it. That belief was the bedrock of Marcus Aurelius's acceptance. He writes about it constantly. Observe the movement of the stars, he says, the constant flux of the elements, the endless cycle in the natural world, birth, growth, decay, rebirth. He tells himself, you are a part of this whole. What benefits the whole cannot harm the part. So the plague, as terrible as it was for individuals, was part of the larger, rational process of nature. It wasn't a personal attack. It wasn't a sign of divine punishment. It was simply the way of the world. That's a profound shift, to see hardship not as a malicious act, but as a neutral, natural occurrence. It removes the sting, the feeling of, why is this happening to me? When Marcus saw a senator and a slave succumb to the same fever, he could view it through that lens. Not as a cosmic injustice, but as a demonstration of a shared, natural fate. All bodies are subject to the same laws. All lives are part of the same cycle. In his meditations, he has a passage. Look at the past, he writes, vast empires falling into ruin. Look ahead. All who live now will soon be gone, and the lives of those who mourn them will also end. Everything is born from change. The universe loves nothing so much as to alter what is, and to make new things like it, for everything that exists is in a sense the seed of what will be. But you imagine only seeds that are cast into the earth. That view is too narrow. He's saying an ending contains the seed of a new beginning. Even a plague, in the grand sweep of nature, is a form of change. A reset, it's a hard truth, but also a liberating one. It asks you to release the narrative of being specially targeted, to see your own struggles, your losses, as part of a universal rhythm. Not meaningless, but part of a meaning too vast for any one person to fully grasp. So a practice comes from that view. This week, spend 20 minutes in a natural setting. A park, a garden, a trail. Don't just walk, observe. Find something in the process of decay. A fallen log being reclaimed by moss, a fading flower, and then find something in the process of vigorous growth. A new shoot, a bud about to open. Sit with both without judgment. Just witness the two states existing side by side, as 2 points on the same circle. Then reflect, where in your own life are you experiencing a season of decay, of letting go, of ending? And where are you in a season of growth, of new beginnings? Can you see them as connected, as part of your own personal logos, your own natural cycle? This isn't about finding false comfort, it's about finding context. A perspective that holds both the beauty and the harshness within a single, rational frame. It's the view from the forest itself, watching the leaves fall, knowing the spring will come again in its own time. When the plague was moving through the city, the question wasn't abstract. It was in the air. A senator might be deep in some legal argument in the morning, and by that evening his house would be boarded up. In that kind of atmosphere, you see it, how small most of our arguments really are. For Marcus Aurelius, the shortness of life became this daily tool. It cut straight through everything, the politics, the posturing, the personal slights. When you can see the deadline, you stop working on the drafts that don't matter. You just write the letter you need to write. Seneca said it. He wrote that it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste so much of it. Life is long enough if you know how to use it, but we let it slip. We give it to pointless pursuits, to petty quarrels, to chasing the approval of people we don't even like. We act like life is a resource that never ends, until a crisis shows us it isn't. The plague was that crisis for the whole empire. It would have changed his day. A report would land on his desk, some governor felt insulted, or a rival was claiming credit for something, and it would have felt weightless. He might have read it and thought, while Rome is burning, is this the fire? His response would have been swift, dismissive of the drama, just focused on the substance. Did the insult affect the grain supply? No, then it was noise. Did the rivalry stop the doctors? If it did, he'd remove the obstacle calmly, finally, without getting into the feud. The pettiness couldn't survive in that air. The clarity was brutal, but it was clean. That's the power of remembering death when it's not a meditation, when it's real. It forces a ruthless sort of prioritization. Your mind starts sorting things into two piles, the things that echo and the things that vanish. A kind word to a soldier who's grieving, that echoes. Winning some heated debate over a minor budget line, that vanishes. Holding the hand of a sick child, that echoes. Nursing a resentment because a colleague got some ceremonial honor. That vanishes. So here's a prompt from that kind of clarity. Think of the top 3 minor irritations in your life right now. The slow driver from this morning. That comment from a coworker last week, the neighbor's dog. Just list them in your mind. Now project forward. Picture yourself at the end of a long life, looking back. From there, ask a simple question. Will any of these 3 things matter? Will they even be a visible part of the story? The answer is almost certainly no. They're the dust on the road, not the road itself. This isn't about pretending the small annoyances aren't there. It's about seeing their actual size. When you see them for what they are, fleeting, inconsequential, you can let the frustration around them dissipate like mist. It frees up energy for the things that do echo. For the conversations that actually connect, for the work that means something, for the quiet moments of real peace. Marcus ruled an empire by learning to ignore the empire of trifles. His court was full of whispers, but during the plague, he learned to hear only the voices that spoke about life and death and duty. Everything else was just leaves rustling. In a storm that would eventually pass, the palace halls were never quiet, even at dawn. Messengers were there, waiting, updates on the illness, reports from the frontier. Petitions, all of them urgent, but before any of that, Marcus Aurelius would have done something simple. He would have gone back to his private quarters. And he would have done his rituals. For a Stoic, a routine isn't just a schedule. It's the architecture of a resilient mind. When the world is dissolving into uncertainty, a personal ritual becomes an anchor. A small, defiant act of order. It says, I may not control the empire today, but I will control this hour, this moment, my own preparation. The philosopher Epictetus, Marcus kept his teachings close. He spoke to this directly. He advised a preparation at the start of each day. He called it a premeditation. You rise and you say to yourself, today I will meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, selfishness, all of it coming from people's ignorance of what is good and evil. But I have seen the nature of the good and the nature of the evil. And none of these things can injure me. This wasn't pessimism, it was immunization. By naming the potential hardships at the start of the day, you strip them of their power to surprise you. To derail you, you greet them as expected guests, not as terrifying intruders. For Marcus, this morning reflection was likely the cornerstone, a quiet period of writing in his journal, the Meditations. Reading a passage from Epictetus or from his own notes, rehearsing the principles he would need, justice, courage, temperance, wisdom. He would review his duties not as a burden but as his sacred role. And then, only then, would he step out to meet the chaos. That structured beginning created a pocket of calm intention. It was a mental fortress he built each morning before the siege of the day began. The ritual itself, the quiet, the writing, the contemplation, it was a rehearsal of control. It strengthened the muscle of his inner citadel, so when the first crisis arrived, he wasn't starting from zero. He was operating from a prepared center. This practice of ritual extends to the evening too. The Stoics practiced an evening review. Seneca wrote about examining his day each night. He would ask, what bad habit did I cure today? What fault did I resist? In what way am I better? This wasn't about guilt, it was about calibration, holding his actions up to his principles and gently correcting his course. For Marcus, after a day of impossible decisions and grim news, this review would have been essential, a way to process the events, to separate his own conduct from the uncontrollable outcomes, and to find peace in having done his duty well, regardless of the result. The power of ritual is in the repetition. It creates a rhythm that the chaos cannot disrupt. It builds a baseline of normalcy. In the midst of a plague, to rise at the same time, to follow the same quiet practice, to end the day with the same reflection. This is an act of profound psychological stability. It tells the frightened mind, some things remain, the sun still rises. I still have this practice, I am still here doing my part, now your own mornings. Do they begin with intention or with reaction, with the quiet building of your inner citadel, or with the immediate onslaught of the world's demands through a screen? The invitation isn't to mimic an emperor's schedule, it's to capture the spirit of his ritual. Design one simple, intentional act for the first minutes of your day. It could be 5 minutes of writing one Stoic principle you want to embody. It could be reading a single paragraph from Marcus or Seneca. It could be sitting in silence and mentally rehearsing the potential challenges of your day and your chosen response to them. The content matters less than the consistency. The ritual is the container. The intention you place inside it is the seed of your character. By starting your day within this small circle of control, you carry that centeredness forward. The emails, the traffic, the unexpected problems, they meet you differently. You meet them from a place you built yourself at dawn in the quiet. A senator could weep until he was useless. But the emperor had to govern. That's the core of Stoic compassion. People mistake it for coldness. It wasn't that Marcus Aurelius didn't feel the sorrow in Rome. He felt it. The difference was what he did with that feeling. Stoic compassion isn't an emotional fusion. It's not drowning alongside the person suffering. It's a clear-eyed recognition of shared humanity, and then a duty to act. Your pain is real. Because we are connected, I'm obligated to help, but my ability to help depends on my own stability. If I collapse into your grief, I become another victim. I'm not a source of aid anymore. Marcus writes about this directly. He says, when you're forced into distress, quickly return to yourself. Don't stay out of rhythm longer than necessary. You'll have more mastery by returning to harmony. He's acknowledging the distress, the natural pull of sorrow. But he instructs himself to return to his center, to his reason. That return isn't abandoning the other person. It's the recalibration you need to be useful. Compassion for a Stoic comes from understanding our common bond. We're fellow citizens of the world. When one suffers, the whole is affected. So to help is just fulfilling your role. It's justice in motion. The emotion might be the spark, but the action is the fire. Picture a plague-stricken neighborhood. A family has just lost a parent. A visiting senator, overcome by the grief and his own fear, might break down. His pity is genuine, but it paralyzes him. He becomes part of the tragedy. Now see Marcus arriving. He would witness the same loss. He would feel the weight of it. You could see it in his eyes, but then he would return to himself. To his role, his duty wasn't to mirror their despair. It was to offer what they needed: dignity, order, practical support. He might speak words of comfort, then immediately turn to an aide, issue calm, specific orders for the funeral, for support for the family. His sadness was present, but it didn't disable his capacity to govern. His compassion was in the action, not the emotional spectacle. This reframes how we think about helping. When we face another's deep pain, we often feel we must feel it as deeply as they do. To prove we care, we take it on until we're emotionally exhausted, burned out, less able to provide support. Stoic compassion asks a different question. Not how bad can I make myself feel, but what can I actually do? The focus shifts from emotional performance to useful action. So think of a time you were overwhelmed by someone's pain. A friend's heartbreak, a family member's illness. Remember the pull to just feel awful alongside them. Now consider if your primary goal had been to find one actionable way to help. Not to fix everything, but to do one thing, to listen without trying to solve, to run a single errand, to sit with them in silence, your own mind steady. Providing a calm presence, not an added layer of distress. That shift from emotional fusion to grounded action is the practical essence of Marcus's strength. It let him care for an entire empire in crisis without being destroyed by its sorrow. His heart was open, but his hands were steady. Gratitude only becomes a lifeline when the water's rising. In the middle of the plague, Marcus Aurelius wasn't giving thanks for the illness itself. He was practicing gratitude for what the crisis revealed, for the strength it demanded. That's Stoic gratitude. It's a discipline of the mind. You consciously turn your attention away from what's been taken. You focus with deliberate force on what remains. On what's been given, even inside the hardship. It's a counterweight to despair. When your natural impulse is to tally every loss, this practice compels you to inventory every resource. Every hidden benefit, every opportunity for growth that's still there in the ruins. In his private writings, he gives us a clear model. He dedicates an entire passage to listing what he's thankful for. He gives thanks for his grandfather's character, for his father's reputation, for his mother's piety, but then he goes further, into territory that feels almost radical. He expresses gratitude for having encountered difficult people, for the chance to learn patience from them. He's thankful for his teachers, even the ones who showed him what not to do. He writes of being grateful that his body has held up as long as it has, that he had the means to help others, that he had philosophy as a guide. This list wasn't made in a time of peace. It was written by a man who knew war, betrayal, pandemic. It was a deliberate exercise in mental fortification. So what might that gratitude have looked like in the choking atmosphere of the plague? He couldn't be thankful for the deaths, but he could be profoundly grateful that his own health, so far, allowed him to serve. He could be grateful for the loyal advisors and soldiers who stayed at their posts. He could find a solemn thanks for the very chance to prove his philosophy was real, to demonstrate courage when fear was everywhere, to exercise justice in allocating scarce resources. To show compassion to the grieving, the crisis became a kind of grim gift. It was the anvil upon which he could hammer his character into its final, toughest form. The gratitude was for the anvil, not for the blows. This practice shifts gratitude from a passive feeling to an active search. It asks you to look at a difficult situation and ask, what does this make possible? What strength does it require me to find? What old dependency is it breaking? So try this Stoic version of a gratitude exercise. Tonight, list 3 things. But with a specific frame. First, list one simple, good thing from your day: a warm meal, a moment of quiet, a friend's message. Then, list one personal quality or skill you're grateful to possess. Your patience, your ability to learn, your sense of humor. Finally, and this is the Stoic turn, list one current difficulty or past challenge. Now, articulate one clear thing that difficulty taught you, or is teaching you. Maybe a period of loneliness taught you the value of your own company. A professional setback forced you to develop a new skill. A conflict showed you where your boundaries needed to be. You're not saying the difficulty was good. You're saying within that event a seed of benefit was hidden, and you're choosing to water that seed rather than only curse the barren soil around it. This is how you build a mind that can find light in any season. It's how an emperor surrounded by loss could still write a thank you note to the universe for the tools he'd been given to face it. The palace corridors were full of whispers, rumors about the illness, predictions of doom. Everyone had advice. And in that time of noise and bad news, Marcus Aurelius did something. He looked for silence. He saw it as a source of strength. He knew panic is contagious. It spreads through words, through the anxious feeling of a crowd. To lead, he had to inoculate himself. He had to step away from the impressions of others. To get back to his own reason, his higher self. This wasn't about ignoring the crisis. It was about finding the clarity to face it. The Stoics called solitude the workshop of the soul. It's where you hear your own thoughts, where you can look at all the impressions that have come in and decide which ones to keep, which to let go. It's a retreat into the core self. The place duty comes from. Marcus wrote about this. He said a person can find no retreat more peaceful than his own soul, especially if he has basic thoughts inside him. Thoughts he can return to and be at ease, and that ease is just good order in the soul. He's talking about a mental sanctuary, a place of inner order. You can only reach it in quiet when the voices of the world are turned down. So picture him after a long council meeting. The reports were grim, advisors were divided. Some wanted harsh quarantines, others were paralyzed by fear. The room was heavy with dread. He would excuse himself, not to hide, to reset. He might walk alone in the palace gardens. Not to see the flowers, to let the silence work. With each step, he'd shed the agitated opinions. He'd return to his basic thoughts. What is in my power? What does justice require? What would a wise person do? In that quiet, the noise of the council chamber would fade. The problem remained, but his relationship to it changed. He would re-engage not from collective panic, from individual principle. This deliberate silence is a kind of hygiene for the mind. It stops you from being colonized by the fears of the crowd. It lets you return to your inner citadel, to check its walls, to ask, are these worries mine, or did I absorb them from someone else? Our world now is that council chamber. Amplified news alerts, social media, the constant hum of digital connection. It's a torrent of impressions, most of them alarming. We rarely step into the garden of our own minds. So here's something practical. Today, schedule 5 minutes, just 5, of silent solitude. Go to a room, step outside, sit in your car, leave all devices behind. Don't try to meditate formally. Don't force positive thoughts. Just sit. Be with whatever thoughts come up. Observe them. Don't judge them. You'll probably notice how many aren't truly yours. They're echoes, a conversation, a headline, a worry you picked up from someone else. In that quiet space, you can start to separate your own voice from the noise. You can return to your basic thoughts, to the order of your own soul. That 5 minutes isn't a break from your life. It's the recalibration your life needs. To be lived with intention, not just reaction. In the heart of an empire's greatest noise, the emperor's most powerful tool was his own disciplined quiet. You can't stop a plague, but you can write one decree. You can listen to one petition. You can review a single ledger of grain. that focus on the immediate, the actionable. That was Marcus Aurelius's method for moving a mountain. An empire-sized crisis is paralyzing. The mind tries to hold it all, the thousands sick, the panic, the uncertain future, and it freezes. The Stoic answer is to break the mountain down into a single stone. And then move that stone with your full attention. Marcus gave himself a plain instruction. Do every act of your life as if it were your last. He didn't mean to rush. He meant to focus. Confine yourself to the present, he wrote. You could leave life right now. Let that dictate what you do, what you say, what you think. That's not a morbid thought, it's a lens. It asks, if this next action were your final impression, what quality would it have? That question pulls you from the terror of the whole crisis. It plants you in the concrete reality of the next right thing. So his days became a series of these singular tasks. He wasn't grappling with the plague. He was hearing the case of a merchant, goods stuck in a quarantine port, weighing the evidence, issuing a fair judgment. That was his world for that hour. Then he was reviewing a report from a military engineer, a new aqueduct for clean water, studying the figures, approving the funds. That was his world next. Then dictating a letter of condolence to a family who lost a son, choosing words of comfort. That became his entire universe. Each completed task done well was a brick laid in the wall. He didn't need to see the finished fortress. He only needed to lay this brick right here with care. This focus built momentum. Action, however small, defeats the paralysis of anxiety. You're no longer a spectator to the disaster. You're a participant. Each small, correct action reinforces the inner citadel. It proves to you in real time that you are not helpless. The modern world delivers its own empires of worry. A financial pressure isn't one problem. It's a cloud of fears about the future, regrets about the past, shame about the present. To face it as a whole is to be overwhelmed. The Stoic method is the same. Find the single stone, the one thing you can do right now. That's a step forward. So here's a prompt. Pause if you need to. Look at the largest source of stress in your life right now. Silence the noise, everything that could go wrong, every past mistake, every future uncertainty. Ask one question. What is the single most important physical action I can take in the next hour to address this? Not solve it, address it. It might be drafting the outline of a difficult email you've been avoiding. It might be one phone call to schedule an appointment. It might be cleaning one corner of a room that's become a symbol of chaos. It might be sitting down to create a bare-bones budget on a single sheet of paper. Identify that one task, then for the next hour, give it your complete attention. Put your phone in another room, close the extra browser tabs. Don't let your mind leap ahead to step 10 or dwell on step 0. Your entire purpose is to complete this one action with as much dignity and focus as you can. When you finish, you'll have done more than tick a box. You'll have trained your mind in imperial focus. You'll have shown yourself that you move mountains not by staring at their enormity, but by moving the one stone that's directly in front of your hands. Marcus governed a continent in crisis by mastering the next right thing. Your domain is different, but the principle that brings peace is the same. During a plague, everyone becomes an armchair general. The wealthy, out in their country villas, would say the emperor wasn't doing enough, and the common people, trapped in the city, blamed him for all the suffering. They called for miracles. They said the gods were angry. In that storm, Marcus Aurelius had an anchor. His peace came from a kind of radical indifference. He didn't really care if they called him a savior or a failure. His compass wasn't their praise, it wasn't their blame. It was this internal sense of what was right. The Stoics had a term for reputation. They called it an external indifferent. It wasn't good or bad in itself. It was like wealth or health or status, a preferred thing. You might want a good reputation. It can make things easier, but it's not a true good because you don't fully control it. You can act with perfect virtue and still be slandered. You can act selfishly and still be celebrated. To base your worth on that is a recipe for misery. The only true good, they said, is virtue, the excellence of your own character. Your reason, your justice, your courage, doing the right thing is its own reward. The opinion of the crowd is just weather. Marcus writes about this with a kind of clear disdain. He says, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinion than our own. Think about that. We prioritize the fleeting judgment of strangers over our own self-regard." He gives himself an order: stop letting your happiness depend on what other people say or do. Your happiness should depend only on what you do. Another passage goes deeper. He writes, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." That was the mindset he carried into the crisis. When a senator demanded special treatment, Marcus would listen, but his decision was based on need, on justice. On the evidence, not on the senator's potential praise, not on future political support. When a mob gathered, angry about a quarantine, he understood their fear. But he wouldn't lift a medically sound order just to be called merciful in the moment. His duty was to the long-term health of the city, not to his momentary popularity. He was playing a long game with his soul, not a short game with his reputation. That indifference freed up energy, immense energy others spent managing perceptions, on political maneuvering, on crafting an image. He could pour all of that into the work itself. The policy was right or it was wrong. His job was to determine that and then act. The applause or the hissing that followed wasn't his department. Now bring this into your own world. Think of a recent decision, a post you made or didn't make, a purchase you debated, a career move, how you dressed for an event. How much of that was shaped by a desire for approval or a fear of criticism? We navigate a world of constant, instant feedback, likes, comments, reviews, glances. It's easy to let that invisible audience become the director of your life. The Stoic exercise is to pause before a choice and ask a question. If no one would ever know about this action, if no praise or blame could possibly follow, what would I do? What course feels aligned with my own principles? The answer often becomes clear. It strips away the performance. It reveals the authentic preference, the deeper value. This isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about shifting the source of your validation from outside to inside. Your peace, like Marcus's, then rests on a foundation you control. You can listen to feedback, you can be kind, you can be social, but you're no longer a puppet, your strings pulled by the shifting opinions of the crowd. You're the one holding the strings, choosing your next move based on a map only you can see. The mind can't be strong if the body is neglected. People think of Stoicism as just a philosophy of the mind, but that's wrong. The Stoics were very clear: we aren't ghosts in a machine, we're a single thing, a whole. The body is the vessel for the soul. It's the instrument reason uses to act in the world. And if you let that instrument fall apart, you're sabotaging your own capacity for virtue. Marcus Aurelius knew this, especially during the plague years. His endurance wasn't just mental, it was physical. He couldn't afford to be weak or lethargic, to get sick just from being worn down. He had a duty to the empire, and that duty required him to care for the vessel he'd been given. The philosopher Musonius Rufus, one of Marcus's influences, talked about this directly. He said, just as we have to train the soul, we have to train the body. He argued physical training builds endurance, the ability to bear hardship without complaining. He saw it as essential for the philosophical life, because a body that's weakened by indulgence or neglect becomes a constant distraction. Its complaints, fatigue, discomfort, illness, they pull the mind away from its real work. Seneca said the same thing. He wrote that we should treat the body rigorously so it doesn't become disobedient to the mind. The goal isn't vanity, it's fitness for purpose. The body needs to be a willing partner to a rational will. We know some of Marcus's own habits. He was an emperor. He had access to every luxury, but by all accounts he lived with a soldier's simplicity. He ate plain food, often the same rations as his troops. He exercised regularly, not for show, but to maintain the stamina his position demanded. He took cold baths, which was a common practice of voluntary discomfort to invigorate the body and harden the will against softer living, and he prioritized rest. He knew a sleep-deprived mind can't make clear judgments. This wasn't about personal preference, it was a strategic duty. In the middle of a public health catastrophe, the leader's own health became a matter of state. If he fell, the whole fragile system of response could collapse. His moderate, disciplined habits were a form of civic responsibility. They kept his mind sharp, his energy steady, his resolve unbroken when he had to review casualty lists at dawn and then comfort grieving families by dusk. That principle translates directly. Your own challenges, your duties, to your work, your family, your community, they all demand a vessel that can carry the load. Neglecting sleep, living on poor food, abandoning movement, these aren't just personal choices. They're acts of self-sabotage. They weaken your inner citadel before any external siege even begins. Your reason needs a clear, well-fueled brain. Your courage needs a body that doesn't flinch from minor discomfort. Your capacity for sustained action depends on fundamental energy. So this week, you could choose one physical practice as an act of stoic self-respect. It's not about aesthetics, it's not punishment. It's about honoring the instrument you've been given to do your work in the world. It could be a 20-minute walk each day, or a conscious effort to sleep 30 minutes earlier, or preparing one simple, nourishing meal for yourself. And as you do it, frame it not as a chore, but as a duty. You're maintaining the fortress walls. You're making sure that when life demands your best thinking, your steadiest hand, your most compassionate presence, your vessel is ready to deliver it. The peace of a clear mind is built partly on the foundation of a cared-for body. He wasn't just doing it for Rome, he was doing it for us, Marcus Aurelius in his study, writing. And history was watching. He knew that. His conduct was a message. It wasn't just a private journal. It was a lesson for the record for anyone who came after. That awareness, it added something to his motivation. His peace wasn't just for his own sanity. It was a public service, a demonstration, a gift to the future. The Stoics talked about social duty. Living well is an act of generosity to humanity. By perfecting your own character, you become a beacon. You make it easier for others to find their way. You leave the world a little better, not through grand gestures alone, but through the quiet dignity of your example. Marcus reflects on this directly. He writes, "You've lived as a citizen in a great city. 5 years or 100, what's the difference? The laws make no distinction, so what is there to fear? The law that sent you here sent you. An emperor is sent by nature. He sees his whole life, even the hardest parts, as a term of service in the great city of the world. And how you serve matters to your fellow citizens." In another passage, he's more pointed. He says, in a sense, people are our proper occupation. Our job is to do them good and put up with them. But when they obstruct our proper tasks, they become indifferent to us, like the sun or the wind. The proper task is virtue, and that virtue includes showing others how it's done. This wasn't about pride, it was about responsibility. His visible calm in a crisis was a strategic asset. When the emperor didn't panic, his generals were steadier. His magistrates made clearer decisions. The soldiers at the gates held their posts with more resolve. His dedication to daily duty amid the chaos sent a silent message through the entire chain of command. Order is possible, purpose remains. That ripple effect is the legacy of a lived example. It turns personal resilience into a communal resource. Think of a leader in your own life. At work or in your family, someone who meets difficulty with a steady hand. Their calm doesn't solve your problem, but it gives you air. It creates space for you to think. To act, their example becomes a template you can follow. Now turn that lens inward. What example are you setting through your own response to stress? Not in an emperor's palace, but in your daily arena, your office, your home, your circle of friends. When a project fails, do you model blame or thoughtful analysis? When plans unravel, do you model frustration or adaptable problem solving? When someone is short with you, do you model retaliation or patient understanding? Your conduct in these ordinary storms is your own lesson being etched. It's the legacy you're writing for your colleagues, your children, your friends. They may never read Marcus Aurelius, but they are reading you every day. Your calm is a gift to them. Your integrity is a map they might later use. This is the final, quiet motivation. To live well not only for your own peace, but because someone, somewhere is watching, and your example might be the steadying hand they need to find their own fortress within. A single day of the plague, he had to use everything he had, and the 3 Stoic disciplines, they weren't separate tools, they were one process, a trinity of response. First, the discipline of perception, how you see the thing. Second, action, what you do about it. Third, the discipline of will, how you accept the outcome. For Marcus Aurelius, this wasn't a theory. It was the operating system, the thing that kept him functional. It's how he turned a catastrophe into a field for virtue. Perception is about your judgments. It's the first gate. A messenger arrives. The news is a key granary near the city is infected. The workers are ill. The grain supply is at risk. The automatic, untrained perception screams catastrophe, famine, panic, the end. But Marcus's trained perception, it pauses. It strips the event of its emotional label. It sees the raw facts. A granary is compromised. This is a problem of logistics and public health. It is not yet a disaster. It's a situation requiring a response. By controlling this initial judgment, he stops the flood of fear, the fear that would cloud his thinking. He sees the obstacle, but he sees it clearly. As a logistics problem, not an apocalyptic sign. Then, immediately, the discipline of action engages. This is about what's within his control. He cannot control the virus in the granary. But he can control his response, so he gathers his advisors. He reviews the inventory of other storage sites. He dispatches soldiers to secure alternative supply routes. He orders the infected granary quarantined with care for the sick workers. His actions are focused, just, directed entirely at the sphere he can influence. He doesn't waste energy railing against the misfortune. He pours all his energy into the series of correct actions, the virtuous actions the situation demands. Finally, after the action comes the discipline of will. This is the loving acceptance of what is not within his control. He has taken every reasonable action. But the outcome is not guaranteed. The alternative supply routes might be raided, the other granaries might be strained, the quarantine might fail. The discipline of will is his inner agreement. To accept whatever result unfolds, not with resignation but with Amor Fati. If the plan succeeds, he will be grateful. If it fails, he will accept that new reality as the next set of facts to be perceived and then acted upon. His peace is not contingent on the grain arriving. His peace is in knowing he performed his duty with excellence. The rest belongs to fate. The philosopher Epictetus, whose teachings Marcus carried, he framed this trinity. He said there are 3 areas a person must be trained in. The first concerns desires and aversions, so he may never fail to get what he desires or fall into what he avoids. That's the will. The second concerns impulses to act and not to act, so he may act with good reason and care. That's action. The third concerns freedom from deception and hasty judgment. That's perception. Marcus lived this sequence daily. You can apply this same framework to demystify any overwhelming challenge. Take a modern example. you get an unexpected, significant bill. The automatic perception is panic. This ruins me, this is unfair. The Stoic shift in perception is to pause, to see it as a financial problem to be solved, not a personal curse, then action. What is within your control? You can review your budget, you can call the company to discuss a payment plan, you can identify non-essential expenses to pause. You take those steps calmly and thoroughly. Finally, will. You accept that the outcome of the negotiation is not fully in your hands. The representative may be helpful or not. You accept that result and you adapt. Your worth, your peace is not tied to the bill being erased. It's tied to the dignity and reason you brought to addressing it. So here's a reflective prompt. Think of a recent personal challenge, large or small, a conflict at work, a missed opportunity, a family tension. Now walk it through the Stoic Trinity. First, perception. How did you initially judge the event? What was a more objective, less emotional way to see it? Second, action. What was truly within your control in that situation? What one virtuous action could you have taken? Third, will. What outcome did you need to accept regardless of your efforts? How could accepting that have changed your emotional residue? This threefold movement is the rhythm of resilience. It's how an emperor faced down a plague, not as a single monstrous enemy, but as a continuous series. Perceivable facts, actionable duties, acceptable outcomes. It turns chaos into a sequence, and in that sequence you always know what to do next. The plague in Rome did eventually end. But the lessons it created, those stayed. Marcus Aurelius and those years he lived through, they're not just a footnote, they're one of the clearest examples we have. A case study in resilience in real time. An experiment in how a philosophy can hold a person together when everything else is coming apart. We've seen that experiment. Starting with accepting what you can't control and how brutal that acceptance has to be. Then the discipline of reframing, taking any obstacle and seeing it as the path itself. There was duty, using duty as an anchor and building an inner citadel, something inside you no outside storm could ever break into. These weren't just topics for discussion. They were his tools, what he used to get through a day, to lead an empire, to serve, and to locate a kind of quiet peace right in the middle of the chaos. He left a final instruction. It feels like it was written for anyone facing their own kind of darkness. In the Meditations he wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the takeaway. The point isn't to avoid hardship, it's to learn how to use it. To let it shape you into something stronger than you were, something clearer, more compassionate. So the story ends, but a question remains. You look at your own life. At the modern plagues you face, maybe it's not a virus, but it's real. The pressure of not knowing what comes next, the weight of your responsibilities. The personal losses that feel for a time like they end your world. Which principle from his journey do you take first? Is it drawing that circle of control? Focusing only on what your hands can actually do today? Or is it the practice of the story, telling yourself a different, more empowering story about the challenge right in front of you? Or maybe it's the decision to retreat, to go into your own inner citadel, to find that calm place where the right action starts. Your arena is different. But the capacity for courage, that's the same. The choice is always there, to meet difficulty not as a victim but as a student.